People often ask me what keeps me up at night. And at this point, as I noted previously, increases in the cost of living and climate change are the two greatest impacts that I am concerned about on our lives and businesses and existence in this country right now. The cost of living, Mr. Speaker, is the amount of money needed to sustain certain standards of living by affording basic expenses. Basic expenses include housing, food, transportation, and health care. For the past several years, the cost of living has been increasing, Mr. Speaker. Not just the past quarter, no, the past several years. Mr. Speaker, the rate of inflation in the US, which has triggered the Federal Reserve's response there, wasn't 11.2%. It was 8.5%, or thereabouts, or in that range. So, Mr. Speaker, this has been increasing here because of the issues around the pandemic, the supply chain disruption, and it has worsened in the past 6 months. And the rise in fuel prices as a consequence of the war in Ukraine is another very unpleasant experience. We're living in some of the most challenging times in recent history, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since getting elected, the PAC government has taken more than a dozen substantive actions to lower the cost of living for some of the most vulnerable people in our society. I outlined some of those in brief yesterday. To benefit lower and middle class families and our senior citizens, including our students, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know I provided most of this information yesterday in brief, but I think it's worth repeating again today because the opposition may have forgotten. Some of these initiatives, and I'm going to go through these rather quickly, Mr. Speaker. Free school lunches offered to all primary and secondary schools, saving Caymanian families hundreds of dollars in school lunch costs. Reducing certain fees for seniors. Driver's license, car licensing, passport applications. Removing import duty on certain food items and essential family items such as feminine care products, baby products. Continuing the Displaced Tourism Worker Stipend for an increased period. Provided financial support to employees who had to quarantine and couldn't work during their salaries. Provided financial support to small and medium-sized businesses to help them protect their assets so that they could start operations as soon as the opportunity to usefully employ them returned with the reopening of our borders. Continued the insurance premium payment assistance program. Provided free masks, free LFDs, free testing. Introduced, or increased rather, the private school grants to help more Caymanian children going to those institutions. Increased the A-level scholarship funding. Increased the funding and the maximum amounts for both undergraduate and graduate scholarships. Offered a $1,500 stipend to scholarship recipients. Committed funding and policy to build 100 affordable homes. And I believe that target was a year. Mr. Speaker, we have done what few governments have done in a long time to help the people in this country. Some, not saying that no actions were taken, but we certainly significantly exceeded actions that had previously been taken. And that is without having any layoffs in central government, Mr. Speaker, or the SCGCs. Mr. Speaker, in addition to all that we've done so far, after months of work, we have a number of initiatives which are about to be rolled out to the public. These include the expansion of the Synico offerings, which I outlined last night, and I think my colleague, the Deputy Premier, did some as well. The CIDB mortgages with a fixed rate of 2 years at 3.75%. We're also going to accelerate the adoption of renewable energy by investing in utility scale infrastructure, which will both reduce and stabilize energy costs for the people of these islands. With recent economic reports forecasting a large economic shock comprising global exponential increases in the prices of fuel, oil, inflation and disruptions to supply chains, our government's determination to do more than pay lip service to renewables is reflected by this decision, Mr. Speaker. We will invest in renewables infrastructure, and this will benefit the environment, benefit by reducing our carbon emissions, and benefit, importantly, our economy and the people of this country. We believe this policy and the ensuing actions will be good for the environment, good for the economy, great for our residents, including keeping energy prices down for families, business, and institutions. Lower fuel costs means businesses can keep down the cost of goods and services for our consumers. Mr. Speaker, I could go on talking about these matters, but I want to get to the details of two important initiatives that we'll be taking within the next month that directly provides meaningful relief to the cost of living crises facing our Caymanian families. These two initiatives, Mr. Speaker, will help thousands of families across our 3 Cayman Islands and are designed to help families offset some of the sharp increases in costs. Nothing is going to be a full solution, Mr. Speaker, but it will help and is designed to help as many as possible. The first is a temporary assistance program for residential electricity costs. We know that for most families, after rent and mortgage, the electricity cost is the single largest expense they face each month. We also know that fuel prices have spiked, and this is causing electricity costs to rise sharply. Mr. Speaker, the PAC government has been in discussions with the main utility providers or obtaining information from those that can assist in identifying those in need, and we'll be setting aside an amount in the region of $5 million to help families across the 3 islands with the increased electricity costs resulting from the increase in fuel costs in the months of July, August, and September. The hottest months of the year, Mr. Speaker, and when electricity consumption is normally at its highest. The assistance will be for residential customers only and capped at a consumption of 2,000 kilowatt hours per month. We'll be finalizing the details of the with the two utility companies and rolling out a more detailed announcement the week of June 20th. Mr. Speaker, this initiative, in terms of the combined customers across our countries with the two utility providers, will help some 22,000 households. The second initiative, Mr. Speaker, as alluded to yesterday, is a cost of living increase for civil servants, the largest single employer on the islands. Mr. Speaker, obviously, as I said before, we're living in challenging times, and this government has certainly expanded efforts to combat the threats around COVID-19. We have safely and methodically reopened our borders, kickstarted our vital tourism industry, and we have steadfastly supported Caymanian families and offered regular financial support and job matching assistance for persons still actively returning to the workforce. We have prudently and diligently managed government's revenues and delivered policies whose aims have always been to make the lives of our constituents, our Caymanians, better. Amidst such challenging times, Mr. Speaker, government's fiscal outlook remains positive, as shared from time to time by my colleague, the Deputy Premier and Honourable Minister of Finance and Economic Development. Yet, Mr. Speaker, despite this strong and positive momentum by good ship Cayman, we must acknowledge the inflationary pressures experienced around the globe and the buffeting that is occurring in relation to ships that are much larger than ours here at home. Governments in the US, United States, Canada, Europe, the world over, are confronting the same dilemma of how to safely navigate an uncertain future, provide relief to its citizens, and to alleviate the impact that inflation has, particularly in the middle class and low-income families. While our government has limited levers at its disposal, given the existing drivers of inflation are global factors such as supply chain constraints, war, and the pandemic, the PAC government, nevertheless remains committed to doing what we can. Mr. Speaker, we know that our civil service has worked tirelessly to see this country through each challenge. So, Mr. Speaker, I am proud again to say that we have been working closely with the Honourable Deputy Governor to see what relief can be provided to civil servants within the confines of the approved budget. Mr. Speaker, as we head into the summer months, when temperatures and fuel prices will rise in tandem, the government will fund not one, but three, or support not one, but three monthly honorariums of $150 per month to help the civil service fend off higher utility costs over the summer. This honorarium will commence this month and continue through August. It will only be paid to non-executive staff on grades E and below. Then commencing in September, as families prepare for the reopening of schools, the civil service will receive a 2% cost of living adjustment, or COLA, which will provide a sustained salary increase. Finally, Mr. Speaker, starting in December this year, qualifying employees on non-executive grades will, by way of progression, receive one increment, which is roughly valued at 2% of pay. In total, Mr. Speaker, by the end of the year, the civil service will see a 4.5% increase this year, comprising a 2% COLA and the remainder in pay progression, and 3 months of honorariums timed to help offset rising electricity bills over the summer. These times are difficult, Mr. Speaker, due to the forces beyond our control. Yet working together and within the approved budget, we'll all get through this. Mr. Speaker, the sentiment that I know that is shared by those in this chamber and many hearing this message is that at its best, our civil service can deliver world-class outcomes. We have seen this on so many occasions, and most recently in the response to COVID-19. Given the challenges which have been shared, the government and country continue to rely on the men and women within our civil service to see us through the daunting challenges which lay ahead as they are called upon to execute on the government's policies. As the civil service is our bedrock, the 4,400 employees comprising the civil service are equally the bedrock within our communities. The investment in this predominantly Caymanian institution, Mr. Speaker, has a high multiplier effect across our economy as they anchor their wider families and are equally critical to keeping small businesses and local retailers afloat. The investment, Mr. Speaker, is made on the prerequisite that the civil service must again fund these salary adjustments using savings from within the existing human resources budget. In addition to delivering this fiscal strategy, they must also continue to ensure the government's priorities are also achieved. Mr. Speaker, the civil service has done this before, and I am confident that they will do so again. The pay proposals which have been set out are timely, relevant, and sustainable. And I'm happy to report, Mr. Speaker, as well, that the cost of these have been, as I noted, they're being funded through savings. The vast majority of that has already been achieved within the global human resources budgets of the civil service year to date. Simply put, Mr. Speaker, myself, my colleagues, wish we could do more at this point. But today we have demonstrated that we will do what we can, which is fiscally prudent and what is sustainable. We'll closely monitor the performance of our budgets to see what may be possible in future years. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, this week there are two things that often keep me up at night: soaring costs of living and the implications of climate change. The local cost of living situation has been brewing for years, and as I've said before, the recent spike is due to factors outside of our control, as is usually the case. But that is why my colleagues and I immediately after getting elected got to work putting in place a number of initiatives to help the lower and middle income Caymanians. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is there's a limit to what political and financial leaders can do about rising inflation. especially given the varying causes. But we're going to continue to do everything in our power to help lower the cost of goods and services to the people of these islands, and where it is possible, to help provide a reasonable income to afford a basic, decent standard of living in our country, our beloved Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, we are a people-driven government, and we will always put the people of the Cayman Islands first. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.